Hi, guys, and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, welcome to Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host. Today we have someone very special joining us. I'm so happy she could be here. Her name is Kailey Bartholomew, and she has so many interesting things to say. I met her at my current job. She helped me basically put money in the bank because she believed in me. And I'm so happy to have you here, Kailey. You're such an inspiration. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I am too. You're so awesome. I want everybody to hear how special you are.
Oh, and you're special to me. And I'm so happy I could do this and be here. And we talk like we always do.
It's such a pleasure of mine because I want people to remember how important these conversations are. And we always talked about that kind of stuff. But you went on to bigger and better things. Now you're a teacher.
I am. Well, teacher's assistant.
And what are you teaching again?
3rd grade ICT. And it is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure the kids are just loving you.
I love them.
Oh my God.
It's one of the greatest things I've done for myself.
I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you because you just, you were in the middle of getting your degree and everything. And now you're just out there.
Yep. And it was very nerve-wracking at first. I ended up in the hospital because I guess my anxiety got the best of me and I thought I was going to need my gallbladder removed. And instead I was just anxious.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And it was like a week before I was starting. Because, the shift change, change in general is such a big thing for me. And I didn't even realize that's what it was because I really wasn't anxious the way that I'm normally anxious, but it's a whole, it's my future. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It was a big thing for me and everything worked out and here I am.
Wow. But see, that's inspirational because you're living proof of, having a slight setback and then just bouncing right back.
Yep. Work through it and you do it. You don't let things hold you back.
I don't know if I told you this from the beginning, but I was so happy to meet you and come on board because you inspired me to be comfortable in my own skin. And I was just like, yeah, I could totally be myself here. And it's like, and I know that's what you're doing for the kids right now.
Yeah. And honestly, meeting you too, you were an inspiration to me.
Oh.
You have so much energy and we just bounce off of each other. And it was like the most beautiful thing.
Oh,
it
God,
still is the most beautiful thing.
I know. I'm so happy I still get to see you every once in a while, at least, but it means a lot because the energy, it just kind of resonates. And then I'm just kind of gliding on that for a little while.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm so psyched that you were able to take a look at that article that drove me nuts. I saw it and I said, oh my God, I got to show you. So the article is on the Mashable website, which is kind of an entertainment news website online. And the title is, on TikTok, mental health creators are confused for therapists. That's a serious problem. That's the title. So when I saw this, I said, oh, well, let me just take a look. I always look at the mental health articles. And my son's obsessed with TikTok. So he shows me TikTok all the time. So I'm very, very familiar with it. I don't have my own TikTok account. But to me, it's pretty obvious that I don't believe that these people are mental health professionals.
Right. Of course.
Some therapists fear that the TikTok platform is uniquely able to unintentionally spread misinformation. They're worried about people diagnosing themselves. Do you think that there's a danger of this on TikTok?
First of all, I love TikTok. And I actually the reason why I love TikTok is this is one of the specific aspects of TikTok that I actually love the most. I mean, the comedy and all that kind of stuff is also great, but I always love that people were finally being open to what they were experiencing, a lot. And personally, I am not somebody who is going to look at those videos and be like, oh, I definitely have ADHD, or Charlie definitely has ADHD, because I know that I'm not somebody that can obviously say that. You know what I mean? I'm not a professional. But my biggest thing is like, I think it's a great place for me. I'm like, oh, I'm not alone, or I experience that too. Like, it's more of just like for me, it's an understanding between people, like makes people feel less alone, or, you know, it's just this, it's the same thing with like being in the pandemic. Like, we're all communitively like dealing with this at the same time, and almost experiencing the same things at the same time. And it makes you feel less alone. Like, and I feel that TikTok can be the same way for people who are experiencing anxiety or whatever it is they're experiencing. And a lot of times people put like a fun little funny twist on it. And it's more of just like, it doesn't make you feel bad about what you're experiencing. It's like, I understand the concern, but I do feel like most people probably aren't diagnosing themselves. Now, I do understand that maybe, like, because you said your son's on TikTok, so the generation as far as that goes, like, maybe, but I mean, those kids probably aren't even really understanding, you know what I mean? And if anything, it's like, oh, maybe I should talk to my parents about this. Like, this is what I am experiencing. Maybe this is something I can get help for. Let me talk to my mom. Let me talk to my dad. Maybe I can see somebody. I think it's more encouraging people to seek the help that they need.
Right.
You know, therapy wise, you know?
See, I see that too. I think that anytime you talk about anything regarding anything, it brings light to it. And it brings like an understanding of, oh, you know, let's talk about this. This isn't a scary thing to talk about if we all experience something like this. And it's true with COVID, it was so clear that everybody was experiencing anxiety and depression, you know what I mean? All these insomnia. So all these things that are usually associated with like heavy, you know, mental illness. It's like, oh, we all kind of experience that sometimes, depending on the situation. So why shouldn't we talk about it?
Right. And I think the biggest thing is like, because everybody started experiencing this, I think it brought up a bigger conversation about maybe we should start talking about these things now,
right?
You know, instead of ignoring them, because now there's a much larger percentage of people that are experiencing this, and it isn't something that should be pushed to the side. Like, I think we should be destigmatizing it. And I think this has been a great time to do that. And the one thing I do love about TikTok too, is it's like, it's not like Instagram. You know, Instagram is like this platform where like you think everything's perfect and all these people live all these beautiful lives, but TikTok brings like a rawness, you know what I mean? And it's people's everyday lives. Kids scroll through Instagram, and that actually I think is more depressing and can cause a lot more issues for especially younger kids, because they see all these beautiful pictures of all these influencers. And, you know, they think that that's how life is supposed to be, instead of the actual realness of life and what actually comes with it.
I agree with the TikTok being so raw. I know a lot of people have concerns about young kids. Generally, you know, young kids on social media, whatever, you do have to be careful. He's only allowed on TikTok. He's not allowed on Snapchat or anything. But the thing is, I agree with you. It is showing regular people. I mean, it's very clear, like, who's a regular person and who's professional, to me personally. And I know that some people like step in and they like, for like a funny, you know, take an angle, they might say things that are a little bit more in authority than they should sound. But the thing is, who really is an authority of yourself except yourself?
I agree.
You know, and they're sharing what their experiences are. And all right, one of the concerns with the article is that they feel it's hard to tell between the professionals and the non-professionals. So there's this therapist, Micheline Maloff, and she makes this comment, which I thought was very interesting when we talk about like non-professionals and professionals. From the article, the writer writes that she doesn't see a problem with creators discussing their own mental health experiences, which we agree with, to push viewers to seek their own treatment. But she's concerned with the influx of creators speaking about mental health with authority they don't have. Now, I think it's very interesting because that's what I do. And I speak with authority because I've lived it. Yeah. So that's valuable. And the other thing is, let me just continue with what she says, which I think is so hilarious. This is what she quotes. I think the issue is with non-professionals giving that advice because they don't necessarily have the correct information. And maybe they do have the information from lived experience, but it's not necessarily factual information. There's a lot of people talking about mental health and they're not really qualified to do so. So again, that just brings us back to who's qualified. I mean, we can talk about these things. Therapists I see as experts in that the buck stops there and they have a lot of the information that would help us, get to a healing level. I just feel like what can be more factual than living it? This idea of factual content is really weird. It always was weird to me because I'm thinking like I'm living my life. My life counts. And these are facts that occurred in my life. So why shouldn't we, again, have that conversation? I think it's almost a violation of free speech if you're saying, well, only the experts can talk about this particular subject. And I think it's so important to have alternative voices out there on any topic. There should be like a traditional sounding voice and then the voice that says, well, this is my spin. And so many young people, they respond to that. That's what the idea is, trying to bring everybody into the conversation.
I totally agree because of the stigmatization, I do think that the vulnerability of people on social media platforms allows people to be more willing to accept and get the help that they need. But right, like also one thing, why is it on the creator or the person speaking on it, like you or like me, like what we're doing now? I mean, because the biggest thing for me is I'm an open book, and I always felt that being an open book was more helpful to people to be able to even maybe recognize things within themselves or to be willing to seek the help that they need or whatever, but my experience, I think it's important to speak on my experiences with the people around me because it destigmatizes things, but I just don't understand why it's on us or you or the creators instead of the viewer taking what they do with that, taking what they want with that information. Like why, if that person is going to end up self-diagnosing themselves, that's not on you. Right. That's not on the creators on TikTok. That's, we're speaking from our experiences. And first of all, social media and social media platforms are not going to go away. So it's either, even in school, we're teaching kids how to access the internet and they're learning technology in a way that I didn't learn it growing up. So I just think people like young kids or just obviously people my age, you go to the person's profile from that video and in their bio, it either says most professionals will state that like mental health professional. So it's on that person, just like anything else, it's on that person to do their own research.
Well, I think what's happening, it's like a backlash, which is unfortunate, of like this idea of like, oh, we have to monitor social media, which I get. I did that whole thing on Facebook. I took myself off. I totally 100% get that with the Social Dilemma movie. But at some point, you can't eliminate free speech from everything. And I feel so empowered when I hear somebody talking. It's about empowering people also. There's this sense sometimes I feel that in the mental health field on, I guess, the medical end, personally, in my experience, they don't give enough credit to the actual people suffering from things, as if we can't figure things out and we always need a therapist to interpret not only our own feelings but the world around us. I feel that really is insulting to anybody trying to get in touch with themselves. There's that sense of like self-knowledge, the going after your own personal voice, following your own bliss. Those things are often, unless you have a very, very, very good therapist. And I have, I have two great therapists right now. They're not like easy to find is what I'm saying.
Right. Well, and what's the difference between TikTok and a website that isn't .org or .edu and people, like what is the difference between somebody speaking on their own experiences on a TikTok platform versus, children researching what they're feeling and getting all of these different things from the internet?
Right. And there's so many more things you could get from the internet that is more dangerous than
Right.
somebody saying, this is how I view mental illness. And frankly, I mean, I got to go. I have to talk about this one because she is so funny. Hold on a second. The psychology professor, Dr. Ina Konevsky, okay? She literally was debunking a video about somebody who was like a really popular TikToker. I showed Jack this and he's like, "Oh yeah, I follow him. He's funny." And and I looked at some of his stuff. I was like, "Yeah, he's clearly entertaining." But it was clear that he's not a mental health professional. She didn't like the fact that he said that color impacts mood. And she pulled out a scientific experiment that proves that up until now, scientists have shown that color does not impact mood. I said, not for anything, but if we're talking about experts, as an artist, I could say that I'm an expert about color. And so leave the color to the professionals in color theory. So this is how I feel about the whole thing. Who's to say who's an expert on what and who's covering what research? I'm doing research all the time. And this experience right now is research for people that want to hear something, a different narrative.
Right. And also, obviously, the sun gives off vitamin D, but I just feel like, let's say like winter, everything's dreary and dirty and gross and brown. And, brown can be a beautiful color, but when you see it for 3 months, it wears you down. But then spring comes and all the color, granted, yes, the sun, but the color of the flowers, the green grass, and all of a sudden everybody, I mean, my mood at least is completely shifted and changed. Like you start seeing things blooming and obviously the weather's getting warmer, but the color that comes with spring, I personally think that shifts my mood completely. And also, but even if that's why not let people believe that if that's what they want to believe is my biggest thing. Like if that is what makes somebody happy, then let them believe that. Some things maybe don't need that kind of scientific evidence. There's obviously people like you who you're an artist, you use color, what color does to a certain painting but color also in a painting represents a certain mood in that painting.
We're taught as artists, these colors create this kind of mood and these colors create that kind of mood. And that is academic knowledge that we've known since the Renaissance, and that's taught, that's continuing to be taught inside the academic institutions. And for a psychology professor to just say, well, it's not backed up by funded, research, therefore it's pseudoscience.
The same thing with within yoga and within you think about the chakras and you close your eyes and you think about a specific chakra and it's a specific color that you think of. And that represents something in itself. How are you going to tell me that color doesn't represent certain things?
Right.
I remember one time I was getting a massage from Liz and my eyes were closed and I just kept seeing blue, a blue color. And she was like, oh, well, yeah, I'm working on that chakra right now, actually.
Wow.
And so if I just feel like color and moods have to go hand in hand.
I know. Well, what is color if it's not associated with mood?
Right. Life would just be bleak if it didn't have color. You know what I mean? So I don't understand. I think that's just, but because you're right, most scientific evidence is backed up by, for the most part, you think of pharmaceutical companies and people that want to, there was also, I'm pretty sure you've heard about this, but there was a CIA document that was released maybe 2 years ago that they are doing research on these sorts of things.
Right.
It's just not something that they're releasing to the public until years later. There was research on different dimensions and things related to the spirituality side of things. And it's all real. They have that evidence. It's all real. So who's to say, that color doesn't affect your mood? It's crazy to me.
But also this idea that we have to wait around decades for scientists to prove things. I mean, I don't need a scientist 30 years after I got my art degree to then tell me, oh, it's not proven yet about color. You know what I mean? Not everything should be going down this sense that we need to prove things by the experts. This is going to delay us. I mean, we got AI taking over soon.
Well, also, what is the harm in believing that is
I
my,
know.
like, why, like, I feel like there's so many other important things for that woman to maybe focus on. Like, believing that color changes your mood is not harmful to somebody. You know what I mean? And I mean, I do believe it does, but again, like, what is it that somebody feels the need, is so compelled to say, oh, well, it's not backed up by evidence? Like, who cares? Like, again, it is not harmful to believe that. I understand, like, maybe saying that about things that somebody can be doing, like taking some sort of medication that isn't scientifically proven to work yet, or something like that. But it's just believing that color changes your mood. Like, it is
I know.
not harmful. And it just,
Like the article obviously only gave certain examples. And then when I sat down, I said, oh my God, these are terrible examples. But then I did go to their sites. One of the TikTok videos shows a woman kicking towards the camera with the phrase or the meme or whatever saying, your ADHD is not a disability. And she punches towards the camera. And I said to myself, now that's empowering, because you may have that, or you see those descriptions and you identify with those things in yourself, and you know that there's those areas you have to improve, but none of these things are disabilities. In the TikTok video that she created on this as a debunker, she wrote in the caption, this person needs to stop spreading this very harmful misinformation. And then she writes as a hashtag, toxic positivity has to go.
first of all, I love the idea of this girl kicking at the camera.
I know.
Saying, like, because I think it's more about the label of the disability. Like, I think recognizing, like, okay, like, I need support.
Right.
Because I have ADHD. Like, so, obviously as an education, like, I think having that diagnosis is important for educators because it gives a child support.
Right.
All this girl was saying was like, I'm not going to let it control me. And
exactly.
I think that's a really great and empowering thing to say.
Right.
It's not a disability. It's just your brain is different, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a neurodivergent brain. Like, it just means that how can we expect everybody's brains to function the same anyway? And honestly, I think it's more like you have always said to me, like, it's not a disability. We're special.
I know. I see it as a personality type, an archetype. I believe that with ADHD kids. I've taught so many of them, and they are so, like, they're booming with all this energy. And yes, they have trouble in a classroom. But my son, who was, almost labeled, me, I'm against that. So I was like, no. I'm fine with not labeling him because, like, he did really well this year at home. And I said, oh, okay, I get that he calls out. I'm listening to his Zoom thinking, oh my God, how annoying. I'd be pissed at that kid too. But, like, he did better this year because he felt like he could stand more on his own 2 feet in the Zoom classroom and feel like he wasn't intimidated by being in the classroom with others. So I guess what I'm getting at is many kids have different styles of learning. And that, just as any teacher would. And that's where we as teachers have to meet them halfway rather than, like, oh, you have limitations and that's it,
It's the same thing I think about autism. Like, autism isn't a disability either. I think autism is a beautiful thing, and your brain is different, and quite honestly, we could probably learn from people who are autistic because they have a different perspective on things and they have a different way of looking at things, and they're just as smart. It's just, again, we all have different personalities, and I think that is just a part of that. Right. And it's not, again, in the classroom, we all have different learning styles, and to kind of have for me, having that diagnosis to look at, it gives me a deeper understanding of that child.
Right.
How to approach that child, or in general, how to approach people who may have these, diagnoses, or, again, for my own self, like we've talked about this, it gives me a deeper perspective on who I am and how to cope with it and how to work with it, instead of, like, I don't let it limit me, and I don't think anybody should be limited by what their diagnosis is. It's just a deeper understanding and helps people make more sense of themselves.
I think my main thing is bottom line philosophy of the biomedical model, because when you join the label with the biomedical, it says you're like this forever and this is a
Right.
problem forever. And I don't believe it's a problem forever. I believe that I go in and out of stages.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up sometimes, down sometimes, for many, many environmental things that I could point to in my life. And it makes perfect sense to anybody who doesn't limit their minds and say, well, okay, well, this is normal. This isn't normal. We shouldn't have only one group of people on earth deciding for everyone what's normal for everyone else. I always feel the people who are more on the fringe, they get labeled quicker. And this is what's very interesting to me too. They just adopted a resolution last month that stated that transgender and gender non-binary identities are healthy expressions and they're not pathological or mental disorder. Now, this political decision was made overnight. Apparently, they cured the illness because now it doesn't even exist because they decided it. And so I guess this is what my main problem is. Where are they getting the idea of pathology behind certain personality types?
Right. Well, I think a lot of it too, especially within the last few years, it comes from less older white men controlling the narrative and controlling the laws. And, we've got more people of color in the government. We've got more progressives in the government. We've got more grassroots campaign, people who've worked and won their seat using grassroots campaigns. You've got people like AOC. There was a trans woman who just got elected into a high seat in our government currently. I think the exposure to this, because for so long, this could get really deep.
Go for it.
No, because especially on the trans issue, like for so long, white men are afraid of not being in control. Same with the whole women's rights. It's always old white men.
Right.
They are afraid of not having the control, and they had the control at those times. So they controlled what these studies proved.
Right.
I think now that, trans people are in government, queer people are in government, Black people are in government, women are in government, I do think that research is going to start shifting out of what it's always been and what these white old men have supported.
Right.
They're only going to support what supports their narrative.
Exactly.
Even now within the government, I feel like mental health is being talked about more, and unfortunately it took this long for, it to get that way. And I think that's why I do feel so open and comfortable talking about it, because I feel this destigmatization happening.
That's so good, because that gives me hope. I have to tell you, because I feel hopeless about that sometimes. And I believe what you're saying about the white man narrative. I mean, let's just face it. It is what it is. And if people don't want to hear the truth,
right,
because that's the truth, they're in power and they want to keep it, period. How I see that DSM book, again, hearing from you about the labeling is helpful. I totally get that. And that's a valuable statement, because I'll come out of the absolute opposite end. But at the same time, I'm telling everybody, oh, there's bipolar personality types. So it's similar in that I'm accepting that there's a label that describes something. I just see it as totally different than what they say. So I guess where I'm saying is it's really from the interpretation of what these things are.
I also think what really helped me was that my family was like extremely supportive.
That's great.
They were never really pushy about it. You know what I mean? But my mom was like always sending me articles, like more based on coping mechanisms. Like, and one that always stood with me was like, people with bipolar disorder need 10 hours of sleep. And I was like, I'm going to run with that. I need 10 hours of sleep. Sorry, I can't. I need 10 hours of sleep.
Right.
But I think the fact that we're having these conversations is helpful for families with children who might be experiencing these things, and will in turn encourage them to just be supportive, because I think that's what got me through a lot. Again, it's different for everybody. Everybody's experiences are different. And
Well, we've discussed that in terms of the medication too. And I do want to be clear about this. Like I've said this before on the podcast, I am not against medication. I'm against lifelong medication due to the idea of disability, and you can't think without it forever. Like this
Right.
is the narrative that much of big pharma pushes because they want lifelong customers. I know so many people who had struggle, especially with the things like anxiety, where it can be crippling. So many people probably needed a little extra something this last year because a lot of people went to the doctors to ask for stuff because it takes the edge off. It gets the rumination stopping. It locks things so that you can take care of other things that help your life function.
And that's how it essentially was for me, was that it was just like I was able to kind of get a grasp on everything, because I was in when I got on them, I was like in a very, very low place. So just for context, I mean, I was in and out of this really toxic relationship. I was still living in his father's house, who had passed away. I was living with his sister, and he was, at that time was seeing somebody else. So I was still like engulfed in that life still, and I wasn't fully stepped out of it. So then when I finally got on meds, I was able to reshift and refocus myself. I moved back in with my dad for a few months. And then I was finally able to get a house with two of my best friends, and I moved out and started living with them. And it was like, I was finally putting things into place because I had capability of I was ruminating on that past relationship and all of those things that I were going wrong, or things were wrong with me, or you know what happens,
right?
In those things. So it was just a way for me to stabilize myself, to get myself into a better place.
Right.
And then I started, doing anything creative that could possibly help me. I was making soap. I was I was just trying to, enjoy things, and it was just really helpful. And then I reading blogs and just same thing that what I hope we serve for people is learning about other people's experiences, how they cope with it, or just working through it myself and finding coping mechanisms and doing, honestly, the one thing that probably also saved me was yoga.
Right.
It really, really saved my life. And my mom got me into it, and it totally helps me pull me out of everything. So then, and I was like, okay, I just never wanted to be dependent on something like that.
Right.
So, I met Charlie, and I just kind of started tapering off. And even when I met Charlie, at that point, I don't know if I was necessarily fully healed. And at one point he was like, I just want you to know, I'm not going to deal with any bullshit. So I was like, okay, I really want to be with him. I love him. I need to get my shit together. Dating for 6 months and not living together, I think really also helped me get a hold of that side of my emotions and learning to trust somebody again and all of those things. So, for my personal experience, that's how it happened. And then, I moved here and wasn't on them anymore.
See, to me, that's the absolute narrative, because you had such a tough time. You took something to help you, to assist you in getting on your feet, and you did homework on yourself so that you can learn how to better handle things. And you also implemented coping strategies, which is exercise. Yoga is mindfulness and exercise, these, and being creative. I feel like all those things have to be pushed as much as medication. They have to go hand in hand.
I think the biggest thing is learning to accept that happiness isn't something that just happens.
Right.
You have to work at that. And B, accepting that you are going to experience bad days and bad weeks and bad months. Winter was very hard for me, but I just think that you have to just stay hopeful that better things are to come. One of the things I always say to myself is this too shall pass. I know for a lot of people that when you're in it, you don't ever feel like you're going to get out of it.
Right.
But as long as you're doing what you can to get out of it, whether it's going to therapy, whether it's doing yoga, whether it's creating art, we're so hard on ourselves as a society. We have just been capitalist driven. So when you don't feel motivated, you feel like you're worthless. You feel like you're not good enough, you know, but like we have to learn to accept that, like accept those bad days. Like if you have a day or 2 days that you want to just sit on the couch and do nothing and veg out, like let yourself do that.
Right.
And listen, I'm not, it's not that that's easy for me, but I think too, my biggest thing about talking about it is when I talk about it, I'm more likely to believe it myself.
Yes.
Like it's the same thing as doing talk therapy. Like the more you talk about it, the easier it gets, or
Yes.
the more that like, or affirmations, you know,
Right.
or gratitudes. Like the more you affirm that you are this way, the more you will be that way. So that's too why I just like to, I might not always follow through with everything, but like everything I speak to, I do believe in. And I hope that speaking it will just be put into my own routine, my own life.
You know, I see that there's a lot of value in talk therapy because of that. And there's been times when I made more strides in therapy because I felt comfortable being able to talk about things with my therapist. And I've had countless therapists over 27 years. And I will say that, and just to say this, because this is what was brought up in the article as well, let me say for our listeners that if you are struggling, you should ask for help. And you should go and find a therapist that you like. And you have to go through some different therapists sometimes, but you shouldn't lose hope. There is a chance for you to heal in this lifetime. And it's a lifelong process. Let me ask you, you've had a few therapists. So in your experience, what qualities stood out most in good therapists?
I've had a few, and unfortunately I never stayed with them very long because, you know, I have this thing where I'm like, if I don't show up, I'm like terrified to go back.
I know that feeling.
Terrified. But I really did love the woman I was going to last time. One thing I do wish she would have done was like, I really originally went there to kind of dive into my past. And we were just more focused on like the current, which was fine. But like, I just personally feel like there's things that I still need to work through in my past that I think are affecting my life right now. But she was young and she was extremely personable. She fully believed in spirituality. She believed in the chakras. She was like earthy, spiritual. Like it wasn't necessarily just about, you know, I was going to like a clinic. I wasn't going to like a private practice. Therapists that are in those positions, I feel like they're there for the people because, I mean, obviously the money can be great. So it's not even about the money. It's about truly helping people. And I don't know, she was just cool. You know what I mean? Like she had tattoos. She like was stylish and she was young. And like, we really connected on that level. Like we were talking about chakras, like we were talking about like that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, like I've never had a therapist that was talking about spirituality in this way.
Right.
And then there was one other woman, I think I talked to you about her, and her approach was really interesting. And I do wish I would have stayed with her, but she was so far away. But she had these little buzzers that I would put in my hand. I had headphones and the buzzers would buzz alternately. And then there would be noise in my ears. And it's a form of what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to help bring the repressed memories back to your conscious mind. So, because I have always been fascinated about the subconscious. Like my bachelor's is in psychology and my own mental health is really what pushed me to get that degree. But I've always also correlated it with education and developmental psychology. And I just think it helps me have a deeper understanding of people and myself.
Right.
And again, not that it's like, this is who you are, this is the way you are, but I find people so interesting.
We all are trying to care about each other's mental health. It's clear the professionals want it, the non-professionals want it. I think our main thing is you have to have the conversation. Otherwise, it's only in the hands of one group of people, the answers. And I don't believe that even for a second, because everybody's so different.
There is no one way of anything. Like there's still so much research that needs to be done about our brains. Yes, I know there's research, but like our brains are constantly changing. So who's to even say that they're correct in their analysis or they're correct in their diagnosis?
Mainly, I think it's really just having the faith that you can get better.
Yeah.
Because you can. Whether you take meds, you take the label, whatever it is. But people, I'm a non-professional, but I'm saying you can get better. Okay?
And we can all experience the same things and do that without self-diagnosing ourselves. And we can just enjoy the fact that we all experience things together and we're not alone. And
I feel it's almost a thing to celebrate. I feel it's mental illness is a thing that hits right before the breakthrough.
I want to believe there is a breakthrough happening, and I do think it. I do see a shift. It just might not happen as quickly as we want it to.
I know.
We're in the right direction at this point.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Kailey, thank you so much for joining us today. Always good to hear your voice, and you're the best.
Oh, I love you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.